The gunshot echoed across the auction yard, silencing the bustling crowd as dust swirled in the late afternoon sun. Zara Winters flinched but kept her head bowed, tears cutting clean tracks down her dirt-smudged face as she knelt in the center of the crude wooden platform. Her once fine blue dress was torn at the shoulder, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face. The year was 1875, and in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, a woman alone might as well have been wearing a target. I said, "500 for the girl. Any other takers?" Bellowed the auctioneer, a fat man with yellowed teeth who called himself Mortimer. Zara wasn't technically a slave. Slavery had been abolished a decade prior, but out here in the territories, a woman whose husband had died of fever could be sold to cover his debts with few questions asked, especially when the local judge had financial interests in the outcome. "I got $550, called a voice, and Zara didn't need to look up to know. It belonged to Vernon Hatch, owner of the local saloon who'd been eyeing her since the day she and Thomas had arrived in Dry Creek 3 months ago. "She'll look mighty fine serving drinks to my customers." "600, countered another voice, rougher and deeper. Boyd Tucker, the cattle baron who owned half the valley and was known for how he treated the women who worked his ranch house. His last housekeeper had disappeared without a trace. Zara's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Thomas had been so certain they could make a new life here. Now he was buried on the ridge overlooking town, and she was property to be sold to the highest bidder. "650 for the widow," called Hatch again, a cruel smile evident in his voice. "700, Tucker responded lazily. "Going once for 700, Mortimer called, raising his gavel. "No." The single word cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife. Heads turned toward the back of the gathering where a tall figure stood, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a dusty black hat. His coat was trail-worn, but the gun at his hip gleamed in the sunlight. "What's that, mister?" Mortimer asked, squinting at the newcomer. The man stepped forward, and the crowd parted before him like water around a stone. His boots made no sound in the dust as he approached the platform. Zara raised her head slightly, catching sight of a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble, piercing blue eyes, and a mouth set in a hard line. "I said no," he repeated, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge. "The auction's over." "Now see here," Mortimer sputtered. "This is a legal proceeding to satisfy debts." The stranger's hand moved to rest casually on his holstered revolver. "I know exactly what this is." Tucker stepped forward, his hand hovering near his own weapon. "You're interrupting business, Cowboy." "Who the hell do you think you are?" The stranger's gaze never wavered. "Preston Drake, and I think I'm the man who's telling you that no one touches this woman again." Zara's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met briefly. There was something in his gaze, not pity, but a cold fury that seemed to burn beneath his calm exterior. "This ain't your concern, Drake," Hatch said, moving to stand beside Tucker. "Unless you're planning to outbid us," Preston Drake's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "I'm not bidding. I'm ending this." In a movement so smooth it seemed almost casual, he tossed a leather pouch onto the platform. It landed with a heavy thud, spilling open to reveal gold coins. "That's $1,000, he said. "More than enough to cover any legitimate debt. The lady walks free." Mortimer hesitated, glancing between the gold and the two men who'd been bidding. Tucker was the most powerful man in the county, but there was something about Drake that gave him pause. "The proceeding's legal," Tucker insisted. "Judge Crawford himself signed the papers." "Then I'll take it up with the judge," Drake replied evenly. "After the lady is safely away from here." Zara couldn't believe what was happening. She'd never seen this man before in her life. Why would a stranger risk everything for someone he didn't know? Tucker's face darkened with anger. "You're making a mistake, mister. Wouldn't be my first." Drake stepped onto the platform and extended his hand to Zara. "Madam," hesitantly, she placed her trembling fingers in his calloused palm. His hand was warm and strong as he helped her to her feet. "This ain't over," Tucker called as Drake led Zara away from the platform. "You just bought yourself trouble." Drake didn't look back as he guided Zara through the dispersing crowd. "Trouble found me long before I rode into this town." Zara could feel the stares of the townspeople following them as they walked down the main street. Some looked at her with pity, others with scorn, and more than a few men with the same predatory interest that had been in Tucker and Hatch's eyes. "Why?" She finally managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from crying. "Why would you help me?" Drake slowed his pace, finally looking down at her. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes and a thin scar that ran along his jawline. "I've seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes, madam. Wasn't about to stand by and watch another." "They'll come after you," she said. "Tucker doesn't forget a slight. Let him come." There wasn't bravado in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Zara shook her head. "They seized our cabin to satisfy the debt. Everything I own was in it." Drake nodded as if he'd expected as much. "There's a boarding house at the edge of town. The owner, Mrs. Chen, is a good woman. She'll give you a room for the night while we figure things out." I made myself responsible for you back there. I don't walk away from my responsibilities." They reached the end of the main street, where a large bay horse was hitched to a post. Drake untied the reins and led the animal alongside them as they continued toward a modest 2-story building set apart from the saloons and shops of Dry Creek. "I don't even know you," Zara said, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, following this stranger. "How do I know you're any better than the men back there?" Drake stopped walking and turned to face her. "You don't. All I can give you is my word that I mean you no harm. If you'd rather make your own way, the gold is yours. Take it and go wherever you want." Zara studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. She'd thought herself a good judge of character when she married Thomas, but their westward journey had proven that even the most seemingly decent men could harbor darkness. But there was something in Drake's steady gaze that spoke of honor, a quality she'd thought extinct in this harsh territory. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted finally. "My family is back east, and I have no money to return to them, even with your gold." "Then let's get you settled at Mrs. Chen's for now. Tomorrow is soon enough to decide what comes next." Mrs. Chen turned out to be a tiny woman with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, took in Zara's disheveled appearance without comment. "Room at the back," she said after Drake explained the situation. "No men upstairs after 8. Breakfast at 6. "Thank you," Zara murmured, following the older woman up the narrow staircase. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair by the window that overlooked a small garden. "Bath down the hall," Mrs. Chen said. "I bring hot water. You need clothes?" Zara nodded, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "I have nothing but what I'm wearing." Mrs. Chen gave a brisk nod. "I find something. Rest now." She paused at the door, her expression softening slightly. "That Drake. Good man, not like others here." After the older woman left, Zara sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up to her in a rush of exhaustion and delayed shock. She'd awakened that morning in her own cabin, preparing to visit Thomas's grave, as she did every day. Then the sheriff had arrived with Tucker and Judge Crawford, presenting papers claiming Thomas had borrowed money he'd never repaid. It was a lie. Thomas had been meticulous about their finances, but with no family or friends to stand for her, Zara had been powerless to fight back. They dragged her to the auction yard, expecting her to fetch a good price as a servant to one of the town's influential men. If not for Preston Drake, a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered with a bundle of clothing and a tray with a bowl of fragrant soup and a chunk of bread. "Eat," she commanded. "Bath after. Man waiting downstairs to speak with you when ready." "Mr. Drake, Mrs. Chen nodded. "He say no hurry. Rest first if need." After the woman left, Zara ate the soup, a delicious broth with vegetables and bits of chicken, and changed into the simple cotton dress Mrs. Chen had provided. It was a bit loose but clean and whole, unlike her torn blue dress. The promised bath restored some of her equilibrium, and by the time she descended the stairs to the small parlor where Drake waited, Zara felt more like herself than she had since Thomas's death. Drake stood when she entered, removing his hat. Without the shadow of the brim, his features were clearer, handsome in a rugged way, with those startling blue eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. "Mrs. Winters," he said with a slight nod. "You look better." "Thank you for everything, Mr. Drake. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "No need," he gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We should talk about what happens next." Zara settled into the chair, smoothing her borrowed dress. "You mentioned taking my case to Judge Crawford, but I should warn you he's deep in Tucker's pocket. They've been friends for years." Drake's expression didn't change. "I figured as much. That means legal recourse is unlikely." "Then what options do I have?" Zara asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "You could leave Dry Creek. The gold would get you back east to your family. And let them get away with what they've done, with stealing everything Thomas and I worked for." Anger flared suddenly, surprising her with its intensity. "My husband is buried on that ridge. I can't just abandon him." Something like approval flickered in Drake's eyes. "Then we fight." "How?" "I have no proof the debt is fabricated. It's my word against theirs." "Sometimes proof finds its way to the surface if you dig in the right places." Drake leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your husband. What brought you to Dry Creek?" Zara took a deep breath. "Thomas was a surveyor. We came west because the railroad was hiring men to map potential routes. The pay was good, and Thomas had dreams of settling somewhere with open skies. He loved the land out here." Her voice softened with memory. "We were going to build a real home once his contract was complete. Maybe start a family. When did he die?" 3 months ago. Fever took him in just 5 days. The doctor couldn't do anything." Zara swallowed hard against the grief that still threatened to overwhelm her. "Afterwards, I stayed on at our cabin. I took in laundry, did some mending for folks in town. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by while I decided what to do next." Drake nodded slowly. "And Tucker, Hatch, any dealings with them before today?" "Tucker came by the cabin about a month after Thomas died. Said he was sorry for my loss and offered to buy our land. When I refused, he became unpleasant, suggested I wouldn't last long on my own." Zara's fingers twisted in the fabric of her dress. "Hatch was more direct, offered me a job at his saloon several times. The kind of job no decent woman would accept. And the judge never spoke to him directly, but I saw him with Tucker at the saloon once when I was delivering mended shirts. They seemed very friendly." Drake was silent for a moment, considering. "I think your husband's work for the railroad might be the key." "How so?" "Railroads mean money, big money, and men like Tucker, they see the land as theirs by right. If your husband was surveying routes that might have threatened Tucker's interests." Understanding dawned. "You think they killed Thomas?" Drake's expression was carefully neutral. "I think the fever might have been convenient." The idea was shocking, but as Zara considered it, pieces began falling into place. Thomas had been perfectly healthy until suddenly he wasn't. And he'd been excited about something in the days before he fell ill, something about the survey that he'd wanted to discuss with his superiors. "If you're right," she said slowly, "how do we prove it?" "I need to send some telegrams, and we need to find your husband's papers, his maps, his notes." "Would they still be in your cabin?" "If they haven't destroyed them, but Tucker's men are probably watching the place." Drake stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Let me worry about that. For now, you should rest. You're safe here with Mrs. Chen." "What if Tucker or Hatch comes looking for me?" A cold smile touched Drake's lips. "They won't. Not tonight. I made sure they understand that would be unwise." Before she could ask what he meant, he was moving toward the door. "Lock your room tonight, Mrs. Winters. I'll return in the morning." "Mr. Drake," she called as he reached for the doorknob. "How do you know so much about men like Tucker?" He paused, his back to her. "Because I've hunted them before." With that cryptic statement, he was gone, leaving Zara with more questions than answers about the mysterious man who had intervened in her life, so unexpectedly. The next morning, Zara awoke to the sound of voices downstairs. She dressed quickly in her borrowed clothes and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Mrs. Chen serving breakfast to Drake and another man she didn't recognize. "Ah, Mrs. Winters," Drake said, standing as she entered. "This is Benjamin Walsh, telegraph operator for the railroad company." Walsh was a thin, nervous-looking man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. "Madam," he said with a nod, "Mr. Drake here says you're Thomas Winters' widow?" "Yes," Zara confirmed, taking the seat Drake pulled out for her. "Did you know my husband?" "Not personally, but I received all his reports. Fine work, very detailed." Walsh adjusted his spectacles. "I was surprised when he stopped sending them. The company assumed he'd abandoned his post until we got word he'd died." Zara frowned. "Abandoned?" "I sent a letter myself informing the company of his death." Walsh and Drake exchanged a glance. "The company never received it," Walsh said. "In fact, there's been some confusion about the whole matter. Your husband's last report indicated he'd found an ideal pass through the mountains that would save the company thousands in construction costs. He was supposed to send detailed maps, but they never arrived." "Those maps would be valuable to anyone with land interests in the area," Drake commented, watching Zara closely. "They would," Walsh agreed. "Especially to someone who might want the railroad to use a different route, perhaps one that crossed their property, and would require the company to pay for the right-of-way." "Someone like Boyd Tucker," Zara said softly. Drake nodded. "I rode out to your cabin last night, Mrs. Winters." "You did." "Was anyone watching it?" "Two men. They didn't see me." There was something in his tone that suggested the men might not have seen anything ever again, but Zara didn't press. "I found these hidden under a loose floorboard beneath your bed." He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather case. Zara recognized it immediately. Thomas's survey case. "I looked everywhere for it after he died. I thought perhaps the doctor had taken it by mistake." Drake opened the case, revealing several folded maps and a small leather-bound notebook. "Your husband was thorough. He documented everything, including conversations with locals about the best route through the pass." Walsh eagerly took the maps, spreading one out on the table. "This is excellent work. The company will be very interested in this route." "There's more," Drake said, opening the notebook to a marked page. "Mr. Winters also documented a meeting with Boyd Tucker 3 days before he fell ill. Tucker offered him money to recommend a route through Tucker's land. When your husband refused, Tucker threatened him." Zara's hands trembled as she took the notebook, recognizing Thomas's neat handwriting. February 17, 1875 B. Tucker approached with offer of $500 to alter survey in favor of northern route. Refused. Tucker made veiled threats. Must report this to company headquarters. Will send maps and full account with next mail coach. He never got the chance to send it, Zara whispered. The fever started the next day. May I see the notebook? Walsh asked gently. As Zara handed it over, Drake continued. I also found this. From his pocket, he produced a small glass vial with a few drops of dark liquid still visible at the bottom. What is it? Zara asked. I believe it's arsenic, Drake said grimly. Found it hidden in a hollowed-out book in your cabin. Someone planted it there, probably to implicate you if questions were ever raised about your husband's death. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. They murdered him, and they were going to blame me if anyone investigated. The perfect plan, Drake agreed. With you gone sold to Hatch or Tucker, where they could control you and Thomas's papers destroyed, no one would ever know what really happened. But why wait 3 months to come after me? Why not do it immediately after Thomas died? The railroad company, Walsh supplied, looking up from the notebook. They sent an inquiry about the missing reports 2 weeks ago. Standard procedure when a surveyor stops sending in his work. My guess is Tucker intercepted it and realized someone might come looking for answers. So they invented the debt as an excuse to get rid of me, Zara said, anger replacing her shock. If you hadn't come along when you did, Mr. Drake. But I did, he said simply. And now we have enough evidence to bring Tucker down if we play this right. Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly listening while preparing more coffee, spoke up. Tucker not go down easy. He kill before. Everyone know, no one prove. Drake's expression hardened. We'll need to be careful. Tucker will realize something's wrong when his men don't report back. You, Zara began, then stopped, not wanting to ask directly what had happened to the men watching her cabin. They're tied up in your root cellar, Drake said, correctly interpreting her unasked question. Uncomfortable but alive, but they won't stay missing for long. What do we do? Zara asked. Mr. Walsh is going to take these documents to the nearest U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson. It's a 2-day ride. Until he returns with help, we need to stay ahead of Tucker. Walsh carefully returned the maps and notebook to the leather case. I'll leave immediately. The company will want justice for Mr. Winters, and these survey maps are valuable property. After Walsh departed, Drake turned to Mrs. Chen. It's not safe for Mrs. Winters to stay here. Tucker will come looking eventually. The older woman nodded. I know place. My cousin have cabin in Hills. No one know about it. Perfect, Drake said. Can you get her there safely? Yes. Take back trails. No one see. Zara looked between them. And what will you be doing, Mr. Drake? Keeping Tucker occupied. He needs to believe you fled town. If he's chasing shadows, he won't be looking in the hills. That's dangerous, Zara protested. You've already risked enough for me. Drake's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Winters, Zara, I gave you my word that no one would touch you again. I intend to keep it. The way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. At least tell me why you're doing this. The truth this time. He was silent for a long moment. Because 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar situation. No one stood up for her then. His voice roughened. I was away, fighting in a war that had already ended, but nobody told us. By the time I returned home, she was gone, sold to a man who wanted her for his own purposes. I tracked them for 2 years before I found her grave. I'm so sorry, Zara whispered. Since then, I've made it my business to stop men like Tucker wherever I find them. He stood abruptly. We should move quickly. Pack whatever you need. I'll meet you both at the edge of town in an hour. An hour later, Zara found herself following Mrs. Chen along a narrow trail that wound into the foothills east of Dry Creek. Drake had escorted them to the edge of town before riding conspicuously west, ensuring anyone watching would follow him instead of the 2 women slipping quietly into the trees. How much farther? Zara asked as they climbed higher, the afternoon sun beating down on them. Not far now, Mrs. Chen replied, her small frame moving with surprising agility over the rocky terrain. Cousin Yang never used this place in summer, too busy with laundry business in town. The cabin, when they reached it, was little more than a 1-room structure built against the side of a hill. It was crude but solid, with a small stone fireplace and a single window overlooking the valley below. From this vantage point, Zara could see Dry Creek spread out like a child's toy town. We be safe here, Mrs. Chen said, unlocking the door with a key she produced from a pouch at her waist. No one know about this place except family. Inside was sparse but clean a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. A trapdoor in the floor revealed a small root cellar stocked with preserved foods. Yang come hunting sometimes in winter. Keep place ready. Mrs. Chen lit a small fire in the fireplace. I stay tonight, go back to town tomorrow, less suspicious if I there. Thank you for everything, Zara said, helping to unpack the few supplies they'd brought. I don't know what I would have done without your kindness. Mrs. Chen waved away her thanks. World need more kindness, too much cruelty already. She paused, studying Zara with those sharp eyes. That Drake. He good man, you see this? Yes, Zara admitted, though he carries a heavy burden. All strong men do, Mrs. Chen said with a nod. He look at you special way. Zara felt her cheeks warm. He's just keeping a promise. The older woman made a sound that might have been a laugh. I old, not blind. He could keep promise many ways. Choose way that keep you close. Before Zara could formulate a response, a sound outside the cabin froze them both. Footsteps, moving steadily closer. Mrs. Chen quickly doused the fire while Zara searched frantically for something to use as a weapon. The door opened, and Preston Drake stepped inside, his expression grim and a fresh cut across his left cheekbone. "Mr. Drake," Zara rushed forward without thinking. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, though he didn't pull away when she reached up to examine the cut. "Just a graze." "What happened?" Mrs. Chen demanded, relighting the fire. "Tucker's men found me faster than expected. There was a brief disagreement." His eyes met Zara's. "I led them far west before doubling back. No one followed me here." "Sit," Mrs. Chen commanded, pulling herbs from her bag. "I fix face." While the older woman tended to his wound, Zara prepared coffee using the supplies in the cabin. The domestic task helped calm her nerves, which were still jangling from the fear that Tucker had found their hiding place. "Walsh got away clean," Drake said, as Mrs. Chen applied a pungent paste to his cut. "Should reach Tucson by tomorrow night if he rides hard." "And then?" Zara asked, handing him a cup of coffee. "The marshal will need at least a day to organize a proper posse. They'll have to gather evidence, take statements. 3 days, maybe 4, before they arrive." He took a sip of the coffee. "We need to stay hidden until then, Mrs. Chen finished her ministrations with a satisfied nod. "Keep clean, no infection." She gathered her things. "I leave now. Better reach town before dark." "Are you sure you'll be safe?" Zara asked anxiously. The older woman smiled. "Tucker men not bother old Chinese woman, not worth their time." She patted Zara's hand. "You stay with Drake. Be safe." After Mrs. Chen departed, a strange silence fell over the cabin. Zara busied herself organizing their supplies, acutely aware of Drake watching her from where he sat at the small table. "You should eat something," she finally said. "There's bread and dried meat on the shelf." "You remind me of her sometimes," Drake said quietly. Zara turned to face him. "Your sister," he nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "Sarah was strong like you, determined, even when the world gave her every reason to break." "Tell me about her," Zara said, sitting across from him. Drake was silent for so long she thought he might refuse. "Then, she was brilliant, could have been a teacher if she'd had the chance, always had her nose in a book." A faint smile touched his lips. "Our father died when we were young. Mother remarried a man who wasn't kind. I joined the army to escape, thought I'd make enough money to come back and get Sarah away from him." He stared into his coffee. "While I was away, our mother died. Stepfather sold the house, sold everything, including Sarah. By the time I returned, they were gone, moved west, following the frontier. I tracked them for 2 years before I found her grave in a small town in Kansas." "What happened to him? Your stepfather?" Drake's expression hardened. "He had an unfortunate accident shortly thereafter. Fell from a great height." The cold precision of his words sent a shiver through Zara. This was a man who had killed and would kill again if necessary. "And you've been hunting men like him ever since," she said softly. "Men who treat people as property, who take what isn't theirs." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Men like Boyd Tucker. How did you know what was happening in Dry Creek? Why were you there yesterday?" "I've been tracking Tucker for months. He has a reputation that extends beyond this valley. When I heard about a widow whose surveyor husband died suddenly, it fit his pattern." Drake's fingers tightened around his cup. "I was too late to save your husband. I wasn't going to be too late for you." The rawness in his voice touched something deep inside Zara. Without thinking, she reached across the table and laid her hand over his. "You saved me. Whatever happens now, I'll always be grateful for that." His hand turned beneath hers, his calloused fingers curling around her smaller ones. The touch was warm, steadying. "I couldn't save Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can make sure men like Tucker pay for what they do." "Is that enough?" Zara asked. "Living for vengeance?" Drake's eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable beneath the hardened exterior. "It's all I've had for a long time." Night fell, and with it came a chill that penetrated the cabin's thin walls. Drake built up the fire while Zara prepared a simple meal from the provisions. They ate mostly in silence, though it was no longer the awkward silence of strangers but something more comfortable. After they'd finished eating, Drake insisted on taking the first watch while Zara slept. "There's only one bed," she pointed out. "I'll be fine in the chair," he said. "I've slept in worse places." Zara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was overtaking her. The events of the past 2 days had drained her completely. She lay down on the narrow bed, pulling the rough blanket over herself. "Preston," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "Thank you. For everything." She thought she saw a flicker of surprise cross his face before her eyes closed, and sleep claimed her. Zara awoke to gray dawn light filtering through the cabin's single window. Drake was still in the chair, his hat pulled low over his eyes, but she could tell by his breathing that he wasn't asleep. "You were supposed to wake me for my turn at watch," she said, sitting up. He pushed his hat back, revealing eyes that were alert despite the night without sleep. "You needed the rest more than I needed sleep." Zara combed her fingers through her tangled hair, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "Is there water for washing?" Drake nodded toward a bucket near the fireplace. "I fetched some from the stream while you were sleeping." "It's cold, but clean." While Zara washed her face and hands, Drake stepped outside to check the surroundings, giving her privacy. When he returned, she had rekindled the fire and was heating water for coffee. "Any sign of trouble?" she asked. "None. We're well hidden here." He accepted the cup of coffee she offered. "We should be safe until Walsh returns with the marshal." "And then," Drake studied her over the rim of his cup, "then justice for your husband. Tucker will hang for murder once the evidence is presented." "And after that," Zara pressed. "What happens to me?" "That would be your decision. You could return east to your family. Or," he hesitated, "or, the railroad will likely compensate you for your husband's work and his death. You could start over somewhere new, somewhere without the memories of what happened here." Zara gazed out the small window at the valley below. "This land is beautiful. Thomas loved it, said it spoke to something in his soul." She turned back to Drake. "I think I could love it too if it weren't tainted by what Tucker did." "It's just land," Drake said. "It doesn't hold the evil of the men who walk on it." "Is that what you tell yourself as you travel from town to town, hunting men like Tucker? That the land isn't tainted by what happens on it?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "You have a direct way of speaking, Mrs. Winters." "Zara," she corrected. "And you didn't answer my question." "No, I suppose I didn't." Drake set down his cup. "The truth is, I stopped believing in untainted anything a long time ago. The world is what men make it, and most men make it cruel." "Not all men," Zara said softly. "My father was kind. Thomas was gentle and good, and you risked your life for a woman you'd never met because it was right." Drake looked away. "Don't make me into something I'm not. I've done things I'm not proud of." "Haven't we all?" Zara moved to stand before him. "The difference is in what drives us. Vengeance or justice, cruelty or compassion." He met her gaze then, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits shaped by loss but not defined by it. The moment was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving quickly. Drake was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. "Get back," he ordered, moving to the window. "Tucker's men, at least 4 of them." Fear clutched at Zara's heart. "How did they find us?" "Doesn't matter now. We need to move." Drake grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. "There's a back way out through the root cellar. Mrs. Chen showed me yesterday." Zara rushed to open the trapdoor while Drake gathered their few belongings. The root cellar was small and dark, but as promised, a narrow tunnel led away from the cabin into the hillside. "Go," Drake urged, helping her down into the cellar. "I'll be right behind you." "Preston, no time to argue. Go now." The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing Zara to crawl on hands and knees through the damp earth. Behind her, she heard Drake following, the sounds of pursuit growing louder above them. The tunnel emerged behind a stand of boulders 50 yards from the cabin. Zara crouched behind the largest rock, Drake beside her, as Tucker's men surrounded the small structure. "They're inside," called one man. "Tracks are fresh." Through a gap in the rocks, Zara could see 4 men, all armed, circling the cabin cautiously. "How did they find us?" she whispered. "Mrs. Chen," Drake replied grimly. "They must have forced her to talk." "Is she? We can't know." "But we need to keep moving." He pointed to a ridge above them. "If we can reach those trees, we can work our way around to where I left my horse." They moved carefully from boulder to boulder, using the natural cover to shield their progress up the slope. They had almost reached the tree line when a shout went up from below. There they are. On the ridge, gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off the rocks around them. Drake pushed Zara ahead of him, shielding her with his body as they scrambled for the cover of the trees. "Keep going," he ordered once they reached the first line of pines. "Don't stop." Zara ran, branches whipping at her face, the sound of gunfire and pursuit driving her forward. Drake was beside her, then behind her, returning fire to slow their pursuers. They reached a small clearing where Drake's horse was tethered, clearly agitated by the sounds of gunfire. Drake untied the animal with one hand, his rifle ready in the other. "Get up," he said, helping Zara into the saddle. "Ride north along the ridge. There's a waterfall about 2 miles up." "Wait for me there." "What about you?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. "I'm not leaving you. I'll slow them down, then follow. That horse can't carry us both fast enough to outrun them." He handed her the reins. "Zara, please, trust me." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Zara knew 2 things with absolute certainty. She did trust this man with her life, and somewhere in the chaos of the past 2 days, she had begun to care for him far more than was wise. "Don't you dare die," she said fiercely. "Not for me, not for anyone." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam." He slapped the horse's flank, sending the animal galloping up the ridge with Zara clinging to its back. She didn't look back, couldn't bear to see what might happen to the man who had risked everything for her. The waterfall was exactly where Drake had said it would be, a 30-foot cascade tumbling down a rock face into a clear pool below. Zara dismounted, leading the horse to drink while she scanned the ridge anxiously for any sign of pursuit. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun climbed higher in the sky and still no sign of Drake. Fear gnawed at her stomach. Had he been captured? Killed? Should she go back to look for him? Just as she had made up her mind to retrace their path, a movement at the edge of the clearing caught her eye. Drake emerged from the trees, his coat torn and bloodied but very much alive. "Preston," Zara ran to him, relief making her knees weak. He caught her as she reached him, his arms strong around her waist. "Told you I'd catch up." "You're hurt," she said, pulling back to examine a bloody tear in his sleeve. "Just a graze," he assured her. "Tucker's men aren't the best shots, fortunately for us. Did you? Are they?" 2 won't be following us anymore. The others fell back when they realized the odds had changed. His expression was grim. "But Tucker will send more. We need to keep moving." "Where can we go? They found us once already." Drake looked thoughtful. "There's an old mining camp about 10 miles north of here. Abandoned years ago. We can hole up there until Walsh returns with the marshal." They rode double on Drake's horse, Zara seated behind him with her arms around his waist. The closeness was both necessary and unsettling. She could feel the solid strength of him, smell the leather and gunpowder scent that clung to his clothes. The mining camp was a collection of ramshackle buildings nestled in a narrow valley. Most were falling apart, but one cabin had a relatively intact roof and walls. "Not exactly the Grand Hotel," Drake said as they dismounted, "but it should keep us out of sight." "It's perfect," Zara replied, meaning it. Any place safe from Tucker and his men was perfect to her. They spent the afternoon making the cabin habitable, clearing debris, patching holes in the roof with pine boughs, gathering wood for a small fire that could be built inside with minimal smoke. Drake hunted a rabbit for their supper, while Zara found wild onions and berries to supplement their meal. As night fell, They sat before the small fire, the remains of their meal between them. Drake had been quiet, lost in thought, as he cleaned his weapons with methodical precision. "Tell me what happens when this is over," Zara said finally, breaking the silence. He looked up, firelight casting shadows across his features. "What do you mean? For you, after Tucker is dealt with, where will you go?" Drake set his revolver aside. "Hadn't thought that far ahead." "Yes, you have," Zara challenged gently. "You think about it every time you finish a hunt. Where to go next? Who to find next? The next man who deserves your particular brand of justice." A faint smile touched his lips. "You see too much, Zara Winters." "I see a man who's been running for a very long time," she replied. "Running toward something he can never quite reach." "And what's that?" "Peace," she said simply. "Forgiveness, for not being there when Sarah needed you." Drake's expression hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Zara moved to sit beside him. "I blamed myself for Thomas's death for months. If only I'd noticed he was ill sooner. If only I'd found a better doctor. If only I'd made him rest more." She shook her head. "It took me a long time to understand that his death wasn't my fault. That sometimes terrible things happen, and there's nothing we could have done to prevent them." "This was different," Drake insisted. "I chose to leave. I chose the army over staying to protect my sister." "You were trying to make a better life for both of you," Zara countered. "You couldn't have known what would happen." "It doesn't change the fact that she died alone and afraid while I was hundreds of miles away." Zara placed her hand on his arm. "And it doesn't change the fact that you've spent years trying to atone for something that wasn't your sin to begin with." Drake stared into the fire, the muscle in his jaw working. "What would you have me do instead? Settle down somewhere? Pretend the world isn't full of men like Tucker preying on those weaker than themselves?" "No," Zara said softly. "I would have you live, not just survive. I would have you find something to fight for, not just against." He turned to her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "And what would that be?" "Love," she whispered. "Hope. A future." Something shifted in his gaze, a softening, a vulnerability that made him look younger somehow. His hand came up to touch her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Zara," he said, her name a rough whisper. She leaned into his touch, her heart pounding. "Preston." The distance between them vanished as his mouth found hers, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something hungry and healing all at once. When they finally broke apart, Zara rested her forehead against his, breathless. "I didn't expect this," she admitted. "Not after Thomas." "I know," Drake said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I never expected to find someone like you, someone who could see past what I've become." "I see who you are," Zara corrected. "A good man who's been shaped by loss but not destroyed by it." He kissed her again, softer this time. "When this is over," he said against her lips, "when Tucker is brought to justice, would you consider starting again, somewhere new, together?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Together," he confirmed, "if you'll have me." Zara smiled, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire beside them. "I think I would like that very much, Preston Drake." They spent the night in each other's arms, finding comfort and connection neither had expected. In the quiet darkness of the abandoned mining cabin, something new took root between them, something fragile yet strong, like the first shoots of spring after a harsh winter. Morning brought a clarity to Zara's thoughts. As she watched Preston sleep, his face relaxed in a way she had never seen when he was awake. She knew with certainty that whatever happened next, they would face it together. He stirred, opening his eyes to find her watching him. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. He reached up to touch her cheek as if reassuring himself she was real. "No regrets." "None," she said firmly. "You. Only that I didn't find you sooner." He sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. "We should get moving. Check if the marshal has arrived yet." They ate a quick breakfast of leftover rabbit and berries before preparing to leave the mining camp. Preston was saddling his horse when a sound in the distance caught his attention, the rhythmic beat of multiple horses approaching at speed. "Get inside," he ordered, drawing his gun. Could be Tucker's men again. Zara hesitated, reluctant to leave him alone. "Preston, please, Zara. I can't focus if I'm worried about you being in the line of fire." She nodded, retreating to the cabin but keeping near the door where she could see what was happening. Preston positioned himself behind a stack of old mining equipment, his rifle ready. The riders appeared at the mouth of the valley, 6 men, moving with purpose. But as they drew closer, Zara noticed something that made her heart leap with hope. One of the men wore the distinctive badge of a U.S. Marshal. "Preston," she called. "I think it's the Marshal." Drake lowered his rifle slightly but remained cautious as the riders approached. The man with the badge raised his hand in greeting. "Preston Drake," he called. "Benjamin Walsh said we'd find you up here." Drake stepped out from his cover, though his hand remained near his holster. "Marshal Thompson," the marshal nodded, dismounting. "Got your telegraph operator friend's message. Quite a story he had to tell." He glanced toward the cabin where Zara stood in the doorway. "Mrs. Winters, I presume?" Zara stepped forward. "Yes, sir. Have you arrested Boyd Tucker?" "Not yet," Thompson replied, "but we will. We've got a warrant for his arrest, as well as for Judge Crawford and Vernon Hatch." He patted a saddlebag. "Your husband's notes and maps are compelling evidence, madam. Combined with testimonies we've gathered from others who have been threatened by Tucker over the years, we've got enough to see him hang." Relief washed over Zara. "Thank you, Marshal." "Don't thank me yet," Thompson cautioned. "Tucker's holed up at his ranch with at least a dozen men. It won't be easy bringing him in." "I'm coming with you," Drake said immediately. Thompson studied him. "Walsh said you might say that. Mentioned you have personal experience with men like Tucker." "I do." Drake's voice was steady. "And I made a promise to Mrs. Winters that Tucker would pay for what he did to her husband." The marshal nodded slowly. "We could use another gun, but this is a legal operation, Drake. We bring him in alive if possible. Let the court do its work." "Understood." Zara stepped forward, grasping Preston's arm. "Be careful," she said softly. "You promised me a future, remember?" He covered her hand with his. "I remember, and I keep my promises." Marshal Thompson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Winters, I'll have one of my deputies escort you back to town. Mrs. Chen is safe. She was roughed up a bit, but she's recovering at Dr. Miller's office." "Thank you for telling me," Zara said, relief evident in her voice. "But I'm not going back to town. Not yet." At the marshal's questioning look, she continued, "I need to see this through. I need to see Tucker face justice for what he did to Thomas." Thompson frowned. "It could be dangerous, madam." "My life has been nothing but danger since my husband died," Zara replied firmly. "I won't cower in town while others fight my battles." Preston's expression was a mixture of pride and concern. "She stays with me," he told the marshal, "where I can protect her." Thompson sighed. "Your funeral if things go south." He turned to his men. "We ride for Tucker's ranch in 30 minutes. Get yourselves ready." The ride to Tucker's ranch took most of the day. They approached cautiously as the sun began to set, using the lengthening shadows for cover. The ranch house was a large, 2-story structure set against a backdrop of rolling hills, with several outbuildings and corrals nearby. "At least 15 men that I can see," Thompson murmured as they observed from a ridge overlooking the property. "All armed." "Tucker will be in the main house," Preston said. "Probably with Crawford. They'll have sentries posted." The marshal nodded. "We'll wait until dark, then move in from 3 directions. Surround the house and call for their surrender." "And when they refuse?" Preston asked, his tone making it clear he expected resistance. "Then we take them by force," Thompson replied grimly. "But I want to give them the chance to come peacefully. Less chance of innocent people getting hurt that way." Zara, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "There are no innocents at that ranch, Marshal. Every man there knows what kind of person Tucker is and chose to work for him anyway." Thompson studied her with newfound respect. "You may be right, Mrs. Winters, but I still have to follow procedure." As darkness fell, the marshal's posse split into 3 groups. Preston insisted that Zara remain with him and Thompson as they approached the main house from the south. The other deputies would cover the east and west approaches. "Stay behind me," Preston told Zara as they moved through the shadows toward the ranch. "If shooting starts, get to cover and stay there." She nodded, her heart pounding as they crept closer to the place where the man who had orchestrated her husband's murder slept in comfort while she had been hunted like an animal. They had almost reached the edge of the property when a sentry spotted them. "Riders coming in," sound the alarm. A bell began clanging from the main house, and lights appeared in windows as Tucker's men scrambled to defend the ranch. "So much for the element of surprise," Thompson muttered. He raised his voice to a shout. "Boyd Tucker, this is U.S. Marshal Thompson. We have a warrant for your arrest. Surrender peacefully, and no one needs to get hurt." The answer came in the form of gunfire from the upper windows of the house. The marshal and his men took cover, returning fire as the night erupted into chaos. Preston pulled Zara behind a water trough, shielding her with his body. "Stay down." The gunfight intensified as Tucker's men emerged from the outbuildings, firing at the lawmen from multiple positions. The marshal's posse was outnumbered but had the advantage of better positions on the perimeter. "Tucker's trying to escape," someone shouted. Zara peered around the edge of the trough to see a figure running from the back of the house toward the stables. Preston saw it too. "That's him," he growled, recognition in his voice. "I'm going after him." "Preston, no." Zara grabbed his arm. "There are too many of them between you and him." "I have to end this," he said, determination hardening his features. "For you, for Thomas, for Sarah." Before she could argue further, he pressed a quick, hard kiss to her lips. "Stay here, I'll come back for you." Then he was gone, moving like a shadow through the gunfire toward where Tucker had disappeared. Zara's heart pounded in her ears as she watched him go, fear and love warring within her. She couldn't lose him. Not now, not when they had finally found each other. Without fully thinking through her decision, she began to follow, staying low and using the same cover Preston had. She wasn't going to let him face Tucker alone. She reached the corner of the stable just in time to see Preston confronting Tucker inside. The cattle baron had a horse saddled and was preparing to flee, but Preston stood blocking the main door, his gun trained on Tucker's chest. "It's over, Tucker," Preston said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet of the stable. Outside, the gunfire was dying down as the marshal's men gained the upper hand. Tucker's hand hovered near his holster. "Drake, isn't it? You're the one who interfered at the auction." His mouth twisted in a sneer. "All this trouble over one woman. I could have given you enough money to buy 10 women prettier than the Winters widow." "This isn't about money," Preston replied coldly. "It's about justice, for Thomas Winters, for all the others you've bullied and murdered to get what you wanted." Tucker laughed, a harsh sound in the dim stable. "Justice, out here? Boy, there's no justice in these territories except what a man makes with his own hands." "On that we agree," Preston said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You won't shoot me in cold blood," Tucker said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Not with a U.S. Marshal right outside. You'd be surprised what I'm capable of." Preston's voice was dangerously quiet. "The things I've done to men like you would keep you awake at night." Tucker's expression shifted, fear finally breaking through his arrogance. In a desperate move, he went for his gun. Zara couldn't help the small cry that escaped her lips as she watched from the shadows. The sound distracted Preston for a crucial half-second, enough time for Tucker to draw and fire. The bullet hit Preston in the shoulder, spinning him backward. But even as he fell, his own gun fired with deadly accuracy. Tucker staggered, a red stain spreading across his chest, then collapsed to the dirt floor of the stable. "Preston?" Zara rushed to his side as he struggled to sit up, his face contorted with pain. "Oh God, you're hit." "It's not bad," he grunted, though the blood soaking his shirt suggested otherwise. "Tucker," Zara glanced at the motionless form of the cattle baron. Dead, I think. The stable door burst open and Marshal Thompson entered, gun drawn. He took in the scene with a practiced eye. You all right, Drake? He asked, kneeling beside them. Been better, Preston replied through gritted teeth. Tucker drew first. Thompson nodded, checking Tucker's body to confirm he was dead. Saw it happen. Clean shoot, even if I would have preferred to bring him in alive. He helped Zara apply pressure to Preston's wound. Let's get him to a doctor. The aftermath of the shootout at Tucker's ranch rippled through Dry Creek like a stone dropped in still water. Judge Crawford was arrested trying to flee town, and Vernon Hatch surrendered without resistance when the marshal came for him. Several of Tucker's men were killed in the gunfight. The rest were taken into custody to face charges as accomplices. Preston's wound, while painful, wasn't life-threatening. The bullet had passed through his shoulder without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Dr. Miller, the town physician who had been unable to save Thomas from the arsenic poisoning, tended to him with careful hands. You're a lucky man, Mr. Drake, the doctor said as he finished bandaging the wound. An inch to the right and we'd be having a very different conversation. Preston, pale but alert on the examination table, glanced at Zara, who hadn't left his side since they'd returned to town. I'm lucky in more ways than one, Doc. 3 days later, they sat together on the porch of Mrs. Chen's boarding house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Preston's arm was in a sling, but color had returned to his face, and with it, a sense of purpose Zara hadn't seen before. I've been thinking, he said, breaking a comfortable silence between them. About what comes next? Zara turned to him, hope and uncertainty mingling in her chest. And what did you decide? The railroad company sent a telegram today. They're offering a substantial reward for Thomas's maps and notes, enough to buy a decent piece of land. Start something new. He reached for her hand with his good one. If that's still what you want. Land where? Zara asked, her heart quickening. There's a valley about 50 miles north of here. Good water, fertile soil. Far enough from Dry Creek to leave the memories behind, but close enough to the railroad for convenience. He paused, seeming almost nervous. I rode through it once, before I came here looking for Tucker. Reminded me of a place Sarah and I used to dream about when we were kids. It sounds perfect, Zara said softly. But is that what you want, Preston? A settled life after so many years of wandering? He was silent for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I've been running for so long, I wasn't sure I remembered how to stop, but these past days with you, I've started to remember what it feels like to have something worth staying for. Zara's vision blurred with sudden tears. And what is that? Hope, he said simply. A future, love. His eyes met hers, vulnerability and strength mingled in their blue depths. I love you, Zara Winters. I know it's fast, maybe too fast after everything you've been through. But I need you to know that before you decide anything. It is fast, she agreed, a smile breaking through her tears. But then I fell in love with Thomas just as quickly. Some hearts just know when they've found where they belong. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. I love you too, Preston Drake, and I would very much like to see this valley of yours. 2 weeks later, they stood together on a ridge overlooking a valley where a small creek wound through meadows dotted with wildflowers. The foundation of a cabin was already taking shape near a stand of cottonwood trees, the labor provided by some of Marshal Thompson's deputies who had stayed on to help after escorting Crawford and Hatch to Tucson for trial. What do you think? Preston asked, his arm now healed enough to be free of the sling around Zara's waist. Could you be happy here? Zara leaned into his embrace, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before Thomas fell ill. I already am happy, she said. The where doesn't matter as much as the who. He kissed her then, the tenderness of it making her heart swell. When they parted, he kept her close, his expression thoughtful. I've been carrying something with me for a long time, he said, something that belonged to Sarah. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold band with a small pearl set into it. It was our mother's. Sarah had it with her when I found her. Zara's breath caught as she realized what he was offering. I know it's not much, Preston continued, a rare uncertainty in his voice. And if you'd rather wait, or if you want something new that doesn't carry the past with it, it's beautiful, Zara interrupted, touching the ring reverently. And it has meaning. That makes it perfect. He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. Zara Winters, will you marry me? Build a life with me here where no one will ever hurt you again. Yes, she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. Yes, I will marry you, Preston Drake. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. As he pulled her into his arms again, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, a journey that had begun in the dust and despair of an auction yard, and led to this place of new beginnings. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony performed by a traveling preacher. Mrs. Chen made the journey from Dry Creek to attend, bringing with her news that Judge Crawford and Vernon Hatch had been convicted and sentenced to prison for their roles in Thomas's death, and the subsequent attempt to defraud his widow. Marshall Thompson came as well, bearing an unexpected wedding gift, the deed to Tucker's ranch, transferred to Zara as restitution for her husband's murder. What will you do with it? The marshal asked as they shared a celebratory meal after the ceremony. Zara and Preston exchanged a glance, a wordless communication passing between them. Sell it, Zara decided. Use the money to help others who have been victimized by men like Tucker, maybe a home for women who have nowhere else to go. Preston squeezed her hand, pride evident in his eyes. My wife, always thinking of others. My wife, she repeated, loving the sound of it, still getting used to that. You have a lifetime to practice, he said softly, for her ears alone. As their guests departed and twilight settled over their half-built cabin, Preston and Zara stood together at the edge of what would soon be their garden, looking out over the valley that was now their home. Are you happy? Preston asked, his arms encircling her from behind. Zara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Completely, are you? More than I ever thought possible. He pressed a kiss to her temple. For so long, I defined myself by what I was fighting against. You showed me there was something better to fight for. She turned in his arms to face him. And what is that, husband? This, he said simply, gesturing to the land around them, to the beginnings of their home, to her. A life worth living, a love worth protecting. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zara thought about the strange paths that had led them both to this moment, paths marked by loss and pain, but ultimately leading to each other. From the dust and despair of the auction yard to the promise of this valley, they had found in each other not just love, but redemption. No one will ever hurt you again, Preston had promised her that day in Dry Creek. It was a promise he had kept, not just through protection, but by giving her the strength to build something new from the ashes of what had been lost. And as he kissed her beneath the vast canvas of stars, Zara knew with absolute certainty that the life they would create together would be more beautiful than either of them could have imagined, alone a testament to the healing power of love in even the harshest of landscapes.